Go straight to Catherine McGregor. Catherine, a brilliant speech by Tony Abbot. China to play by the same rules as Australia, and Australians are forced to follow in China's steps. What do you make of it?
Well, I think that demand for reciprocity is absolutely appropriate. It's a strong measure. And he's also not shirked the issue of the fact that there's a price to be paid for this, Alan. I think I quoted Alexander Hamilton in very early days when we were chatting about China and just said, a nation that prefers disgrace to danger is ready for a master. There are no free passes with China. They are coercive, they're a bullying revisionist power, and they use trade as a weapon. But as he pointed out, they don't trade as a charity. They buy things they need. And there will continue to be a market for Australian iron ore in particular, and barley and others, which they've put in the freezer from time to time to intimidate us. But they'll continue to trade with us as it suits them.
Catherine,
just a quick point on that colour revolution.
Yes.
There's a very laden remark that was made about that. The colour revolutions refer to the outbreaks of pro-democracy movements in the former Soviet republics. And it's really interesting that in the national strategic community in the United States, they're rating the Hong Kong repression as being very similar to Putin's actions against Georgia, which were a prelude to the actions in Crimea and Ukraine. So the choice of the colour revolution term is it's a laden term, meaning pro-democracy movements that they believe are inspired, in fact, by the West to deliberately undermine them.
Well done. What do you make of Pompeo when he said, obviously speaking Trump's language, we're going to respond in real ways? What can be done for China to make China take note?
Well, there's a couple of things, again, taking up that last point, that I think there is limited leverage with Hong Kong because of the session that took place in 1997. They've welched on one country, two systems comprehensively, but the fact is Hong Kong is effectively now part of mainland China. There's no easy way forward on that. But the United States has made it clear. Last week, for instance, there was a heated phone call from the regime to Secretary of Defence Esper, apparently that went for 90 minutes, demanding that the United States not sell arms to Taiwan, that US ship visits to Taiwan would be highly provocative, quote. And Pompeo and the Secretary both said that there will be port visits by United States naval vessels to Taiwan later this year. So the United States is matching China now with action and escalating the tension. I've always thought Taiwan is the main game in this, by the way. In terms of Hong Kong, we've got to stand alongside the rest of the liberal democracies that are saying the right things. Getting out of extradition treaties with China is a good start. Banning Huawei is another thing that needed to be done. But I think there's a lot of merit in what Tony's saying as well. Absolutely. It's time to start exacting a price.
Absolutely.
For any of this collaboration has to stop on universities, STEM collaboration, artificial intelligence collaboration, technological exchanges has to end because they're thieving it. And there are no innocent Chinese businesses. No. They are all arms of the state.
Yes, he's a great loss, Abbott, to the intellectual rigour that should be applied in Canberra. Let's go back to the Canberra, because the Commonwealth, I want to ask you constitutionally, has withdrawn its challenge to the closure of the WA border by the McGowan government. I mean, what does Section 92 of the Constitution mean? That governments can please themselves whether they adhere to it?
Well, that's the point, and I did write at some length about that for The Spectator. Alan, it's not a popular view at the moment to talk about interstate travel and trade and intercourse amongst the states being absolutely free, but that is what the framers of our Constitution meant. They deliberated very heavily over that section, and it has overriding power over the enumerated powers of the Commonwealth in the rest of the document. They didn't write it in by mistake. They founded a nation, not a customs union. Yeah. Now, this is what's really disturbing to people who favour a conservative or originalist interpretation of our Constitution. And it's a Constitution that was designed to ride out the storms of war, depression and tribulation, and it has done so. Next weekend, we're going to mark the end of victory over Japan, victory in the Pacific. The Constitution wasn't suspended and torn up during that time. What is perverse about this crisis is for the first time you're seeing an accretion of powers to the states rather than more central power. You know, you saw uniform taxation laws in Australia in World War II. So Section 92, in my view, needed to be litigated, and a lot of very, very strong defenders of the Constitution, Samuel Griffith Society and some leading silks from the constitutional bar, really wanted that case to run, to test it. They do believe, however, that the Queensland case was stronger, the one that was actually about to be mounted when they reopened the border a month ago.
I just want to ask you this. I mean, if a Liberal government won't fight to defend the specific nature of the Constitution, what on earth are they going to fight for?
Well, that's what begs the question. If that fight isn't worth having, if the Constitution can be usurped by Zoom conferencing, by a supra state body that has no constitutional foundation, whatever, it just relies on goodwill. Now improvisation is fine, but the Constitution has to have meaning. It is our foundational legal document.
Right.
What we're seeing in Hong Kong is no coincidence. Laws being suspended, the trampling on the rule of law. If we don't have a constitution that really means something in tough times, then tear it up.
But Catherine, what about the freedoms that are being taken away from people arbitrarily every day? And before you go, I just want to ask you a quick one. I'm just getting a word out of Queensland that they're talking about hard borders in Queensland. Now, honestly, do we have to mount a constitutional challenge to guarantee interstate freedoms?
I think it was regrettable the Commonwealth withdrew that challenge. The Commonwealth has enormous power under Section 61 to deal with emergencies, and the states can refer powers. There's ways to contain outbreaks without these hard lockdowns, which no state really should be engaging in, frankly. And look, the legal team that was looking at the Queensland border closure were warmly confident based on a very significant decision made during the height of World War II called Gratwick versus Johnson, a unanimous 7-0 unanimous majority of the High Court held that intercourse is severable from trade and it is to be absolutely free. And at the height of a national security emergency, it did not close the borders between states. We really need to take a look at our history and decide whether we've got any sense of perspective left, Alan, on this one. I think the Commonwealth needs to step up. Because if they're not going to fight this one, what chance is there for the Religious Freedom Bill? Absolutely. If they've got no stomach for a slam-dunk challenge of an absolute freedom, what chance is there of navigating that path in the next session of Parliament?
Well done, Catherine. Well done. Magnificent stuff. And, of course, people in Victoria listening to you say, well, we've had every freedom imaginable stolen from us, no mandate for it, no debate in the Parliament. It's just beyond belief where Australia is going, and will we ever get those freedoms back? As George Orwell said, well, once they claim them, they never actually return them.